You know how the Vauxhall Corsa was a firm favourite for boy racers and the likes in years gone by? Well, that hasn't been the case in this latest generation, and now it definitely isn't the case with this update for 2024, which is very nice. So today we're going to evaluate whether the changes they've made to this car, including design tweaks, cabin infotainment upgrades, and when it comes to the electric one, more power and more range, make it the one to go for in the class, or whether the supposedly dead Ford Fiesta is actually still the king. And also we're going to evaluate whether it's worth spending over £20,000 now for this petrol one here, or whether you're better off losing the upgrades and going for a nearly new one. First up, the interior, which has a few quirky features some of us might not be so familiar with, starting with this, the key. Now, usually manufacturers have a little place for you to store the key while you're driving, or some don't have a place at all, so it just gets in the way. But Vauxhall has come up with a genius solution, and you slide it into a slot just here. And handily, it also starts the car as well, which is pretty nifty. Now, elsewhere in the cabin, it's a familiar affair, especially for Vauxhall owners. You get a digital instrument cluster ahead of you here, and you get an infotainment screen in the middle as well, which might not be the biggest on the market, but it has key features, including a new wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto functionality, so you no longer need to plug in your phone. Although it is pretty easy if you have the older one to get an adapter, this is a much tidier way of doing things. You can leave your phone in your pocket and just crack on. And there are also, of course, physical control buttons down there just below the screen, so you can adjust your climate control without having to dive into the menus on the touch screen. Now, this is a 5-door car, which means you don't have to bother the person in the front to get in it. But as you'll see, it is a little bit on the narrow side for entry, not least because that door line is pretty low. Although once you're in, yes, it's snug, but it's okay. I can fit my knees and my feet, even with the seat ahead as I've set it. Although headroom is good above me actually, but to the side, it is a little bit short as well. And look, you can't even put your arm on the side here because the glass pokes out. It won't go all the way down. So yeah, it's not the most comfortable place to spend a long time if you're a fully grown adult, but for a car this size, at least I can technically fit. Anyway, let's check out the boot. All right, so while this is definitely a small car, handily for us on this launch, it has got enough space easily to swallow all of our camera gear and stayover bags as well, because the boot in this Corsa remains very deep. And if you lift the boot floor underneath, well, you'll see there's also a lot of room under there, a place where you might normally find a spare wheel, but no one's doing that anymore. So now you've just got a lot of extra underfloor and hidden storage, which is quite nifty. Although that might not be the case on the electric one, which we're going to drive a little bit later. But when it comes to this 1.2 car, yeah, this update model is definitely as practical as the pre-update car. So let's find out if it's better on the road as well. Now, behind the wheel, we're going to talk about three main things: what the engine is like, what the performance of this car is like on the road, how easy it is to drive, and how comfortable it is as well. But first things first, do the changes that they've made to this updated car make it feel any different from behind the wheel? Well, the answer to that is no, not at all actually. It feels exactly the same, and that's because the fundamental ingredients are all unchanged. We have got the more powerful 100 horsepower engine, the engine with more muscle and more grunt, which definitely has enough get up and go to move you along while also not being particularly exciting. And yes, we've got the same 6-speed manual gearbox in this car as well, which is easy to use and very light to change the gears, but it's not quite as engaging as, say, for example, the Ford Fiesta. And we've also got the same heavily assisted electric power steering, which makes this car feel even lighter than it is on its toes. It just goes down a road with minimal effort from the guy sat behind the wheel.
As for the ride, the Corsa is comfortable for a small car and more than capable of ironing out most bumps in the road. It handles well too, responding keenly to steering inputs, although in truth, it still doesn't feel quite as sporty as its outgoing arch rival, the Ford Fiesta, especially when it comes to twisty country roads. It's just grippy and stable.
Because this is a small car, it's nice and small on the road, so it's very easy to place, and the visibility outside is actually very good. Not only does it feel like you can see over the dash and over the bonnet very clearly ahead of you, but out the sides you've got chunky door mirrors that are quite tall to give you visibility of both the curb and a little bit of blue sky if the weather allows so. So it gets all the main stuff you need from a hatchback done very well, but there are a few smaller issues which I do think need highlighting, because I'm not so keen on them. Starting with this gear knob over here. While it's nice to have a 6-speed manual, the shape of this one is a bit weird. I know it's been molded for your hand, but it feels a bit odd when you actually grip it. Then there's the handbrake, which is very rudimentary. It feels extremely old school. It feels like it's been pinched out of an old 1980s Ford Transit. And it matches the pretty hard plastic up here, so when you rest your elbow on the shelf here, it's pretty firm. And then there's the buttons on the steering wheel, which do feel a little bit dated, although I have to admit, they do the job really well, and they're placed very conveniently, so you only need to stretch your thumbs to activate things like, for example, your cruise control, or to change the volume on the radio. Ooh, sounds pretty fruity as well.
All right, so that's the updated Corsa in a nutshell. Some minor tweaks, but they've definitely brought an improvement to this Supermini. Although, if it's ultimate fun you want, the Fiesta probably still just edges it. Although that's not really a problem this car's gonna have to worry about for much longer, because surely Ford will run out of stock of that discontinued hatchback. You'll have to find one on cinch if you want one of those. But for now, this is the new Supermini, I reckon, worth buying. Anyway, that's enough of the petrol car. Let's see what its electric sibling is like.
Much of the setup that goes into this updated Corsa Electric is shared with the Peugeot E208, which we drove recently, and a link to that is in our description. It gets the same upgrades to both the motor and also the battery. So now we've got 156 horsepower, so we've got more muscle, more performance potential, and then we've got a slightly bigger battery. So this car can now do a claimed 246 miles between charges, which is about 20 more than before. And I can say straight away, this thing feels very similar to drive to that Peugeot because of all those shared components. Effectively, it is nice and nippy when you accelerate, as I can test now. Really picks up nicely there actually. And it rides quite smoothly. It just feels like it's ironing out the bumps around us pretty well. It's a little bit heavier than the petrol car, but you wouldn't really know it. When it comes to handling, this thing is definitely flatter through the corners. It's a more level cornering car because the weight is much lower in the floor of the car. The battery is the heaviest component here, and it's underneath us right now. Now, if you need to stop to charge, Vauxhall reckons that this thing on a 100 kilowatt plug, which is known as a rapid plug in the UK, you can charge this thing from 20 to 80% in under 30 minutes. They say 27 minutes. So, you know, a coffee stop and maybe a quick sandwich, and you'll have enough range in theory to get home. And we know this charging system well because it is carried over from the pre-update car. And of course, if you use a smart charger at home, you're going to get the cheapest potential charging rate. So while this car costs a fair bit more than the petrol one to buy outright, when it comes to monthly payments and then when it comes to running costs, well, yeah, the differences aren't going to be quite so large. Now I can feel this thing while being quieter because there's no engine, and I'm not having to change gears because there are no gears. It also feels like it's riding a little bit smoother than the petrol car, and I wonder if that's maybe because the car itself is a little heavier, so it's just ironing out the bumps a bit better. That's not always the case with electric cars, but in this Corsa, it definitely feels a little bit more comfortable. And also, this is a higher grade trim car. We were driving a GS for the petrol, and this is the top ultimate grade, which means you get a few more creature comforts. And the main one that you notice makes that infotainment system feel a lot more high end, and that's because the screen is now as wide as the full display can allow, and also the graphics are a little bit sharper. I'm also sat on nicer seats with some leather bits as well, and a massage function. And when it comes to the boot, while when you first open the lid, it looks identical to the petrol car, as soon as you lift up that floor, you'll spot that all of the underfloor storage has gone. And that's thanks to the batteries in this car. And not only that, but you also have a bag which has to stay in the boot itself for your charge cables. So yeah, boot space is definitely compromised. That said, as far as the rest of the interior is concerned, and as far as the functionality of the cabin's concerned, both front and rear, yeah, these things feel identical. Yeah, this thing definitely gets up and goes now. Still not rapid, but noticeably quicker than that petrol car. And you know what? This electric version actually feels that the slightly more complete package. It feels slightly more cohesive. So yeah, while it's a fair bit more expensive, it does also feel like you're getting quite a lot of car for that money. You also get a new drive selector, which actually saves quite a lot of space on the center console, but it is a bit fiddly to use.
It's clear that the updated Corsa keeps a good thing going in both petrol and electric forms, while adding an extra sprinkling of style and convenience where it matters. But if you want to see a car that goes even further with the same changes, watch the Peugeot E208 review on the left of your screen. And if you want to see me driving two of my very favourite hatchbacks of recent times on track, click the link on the right of your screen.